There you go.
Yeah, welcome back to the Growth Gradient podcast. And today we have an incredibly inspiring guest joining us. And it's someone who knows a thing or two about embracing change and crafting a life full of response. Cut that part out, please.
Yeah.
And it's someone who knows a thing or two about embracing change and crafting a life full of possibilities. And we have our good friend here, Sherry, and she's here to share some of her insights on what it takes to rebuild your life in a different city. And I'm sure a lot of us can resonate to that as we kind of grow out of our hometown. And in this episode today, we'll uncover some strategies that Sherry and I guess both me and Denalix have employed to establish roots, find community, and flourish professionally and personally in unfamiliar surroundings. And we also have another special guest, Robois, who will make an occasional appearance in our podcast. So thanks for joining our podcast today, Sherry. And Sherry and I actually went to the same university in Vancouver, Canada. And then I'm not sure if you lived in any other cities before you came to SF. And now she lives in San Francisco for the context. And yeah, like curious if you lived anywhere else for like a longer period of time, like 6 months to a year before you moved to SF, or was like SF pretty much your second home other than Vancouver?
So I was born in China and then immigrated to Vancouver when I was 5, and I pretty much lived there until graduating university. I did do a 3-month internship in Mountain View where I actually met Denalex, and that was my only experience living outside of Vancouver up until then, and I realized I really wanted to try living somewhere else, so I looked into jobs in America before, like, for graduation.
Yeah. And so, like, after you graduated from UBC, you just kind of moved out here to SF for your first full-time job and lived here ever since, right?
Yeah.
How was that experience like? Did you have like a huge like kind of culture shock and adjustment period?
I feel like I had a general idea of what to expect after the internship at Mountain View because on most weekends I ended up coming up to SF instead, and I realized I did want to live here full time instead of in Mountain View when I graduated.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, how different was it for you in like the first month of your internship versus like coming back a second time? Like, do you feel like having done the internship helped you not just like figure out like the lay of the land, but like socially, I guess, like going out like into like a full term life in SF?
I think it made it a bit less intimidating because I knew a few people here and because I already had my SSN figured out, like a lot of the paperwork that you don't really think about but does end up being like some effort. Like I had a bank account open in the States already, so I think all those things made it a bit of a smoother transition.
Did you make a lot of friends during your internship? And how was like, I guess, adapting to the SF social circle?
I think I knew a few people from college and my internship, but not really in a coherent friend circle.
Yeah.
And a lot of people did end up in South Bay instead, where like I didn't see them as often. So I think my initial
Don't move to South Bay, by the way, if you're a young person. So yeah.
Wait, curious, because I'm not from here, so I need to hear the reason behind this.
Well, why South Bay is boring?
Yeah, why is that?
I think it's a much older demographic, like lots of like families, like young children. So it's like people, mostly suburbs, like it's very car centric. It's not it's not really great public transportation. There's like a bus system and stuff, but it's not great. Most of the people you know there are from work. Like there isn't really like places young people go to gather in South Bay. Unlike SF, where it's like completely like the opposite. Like SF is more spontaneous.
Yeah.
It's more of like the college experience. And I feel like South Bay is more of like what you think about when you think of like living in the suburbs.
Yeah, I feel like the first move feels the most intimidating. Like I was more intimidated by going to Mountain View for an internship than moving to SF full time. I think just because it was like my first time living in a new city for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And like I've talked to friends who like did move around like during university first, and then for them like moving to a new city after graduation didn't seem like a big deal at all.
I guess now actually it's the question I'm asked, like if you were to move for some reason, like the big one hits the Bay Area and I didn't move, like if you were to move to like back to Vancouver or like actually not back to Vancouver, back to
like a
Seattle,
completely new city.
and you had to restart, build a new life there. Like do you feel like that'll be as daunting as when you first came to Mountain View, or do you think it'll be easier?
I think it'll be a bit less daunting just because I think like as you mentioned we know a lot of people who do move around a lot. So now I mean part of it is I do know people in Seattle now, and I think that makes it less intimidating. And
that is a good point.
The
I think,
fact,
I was gonna mention like at least a good 80% of the people I know in New York now, at one point like lived in the Bay Area, like were part of the big exodus over there. Yeah, so I guess what if it was a lesser known city like Denver or like Austin, Texas? Actually,
I think that would be a bit harder just because I haven't visited as often either. Like I have visited Seattle pretty often, but I think it would be less daunting just like the fact that like I know I've done it once, so it should be doable a second time.
So you kind of see like I guess the daunting part was not moving, but the uncertainty of having to build a new life. But now you've done it once, you can do it again.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think one other thing that makes another move slightly easier than at first is like I think after the first move you get a better sense of who you are because you'll see like which parts of you did change along with the change in cities versus which part of you like you've stayed the same in.
What was like the most random or like spontaneous activity that you tried here since moving here? I guess I can start. Like when I first moved to Toronto, first couple months I was really excited to be there. But then over time, I think I got a little bit lonely because first of all, I was living by myself. Second, I only know like a few friends here and there. Some of them were like kind of cuffed. And so, you know how it is with cuffed couples, they don't really hang out on Friday nights. So I was like, okay, so what do I do? And I actually went clubbing by myself one time. And it was quite an interesting experience because I felt like I was almost like an observer there. But I definitely don't recommend people, like especially girls, to do this because it can be a little bit dangerous to do it. Weird people kind of hit on you like once because there are people who just like kind of like stand in the back of the club and then they just like kind of preying on girls. And there were a couple like weird people that like kind of came up and talked to me, but like I was like Toronto is like a relatively safer place, I think. Also, like I had pretty firm boundaries. Like I was like, yeah, like I'm waiting for my friend, or like no, like I'm just here to like vibe. Don't talk to me. But yeah, it was like an interesting experience. I think it was like I felt like I could still have fun on my own in the city, and I also felt like as an observer, I was able to kind of see what like Toronto people, like how they dress and like how they kind of party. And it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, I think after moving, I also got less scared of doing things like either by myself or like with a smaller group of people or like if I don't know people super well.
I think for me, like my intention wasn't to like, oh yeah, like I have to make more friends at the club, like for that experience. It was more like I have to like just step outside of my own comfort zone and develop the skills to like be just confidently out there and develop that confidence to be able to make friends. And I felt like that can be applied in different social settings. It didn't have to be just applied at the club only, but it was almost like I was exposing myself to new experiences so that I could be more confident going forward in these social situations to like say no to people or like introduce myself and just like kind of blend in with a group that is full of like strangers.
It helps you never feel like out of place, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it just helps us being like more adaptable to different situations.
What advice would you actually give someone who's like just like moving to a different city on their own, like in their early 20s?
I think it's a cliche, but it's like be open to new experiences. Like for me, I had a policy of I'm not busy, and somebody invites me to something, I'll just go. And after the fact, there's always at least one thing that I like that happened. Like I would have regretted that it didn't happen if I didn't go. So a bunch of things, like if I was just too tired, like actually when I met you, like if I was too tired, I just didn't go to that museum event, like I would have never met you. Or I wouldn't have met Jacqueline's result. There's so many like, butterfly effects that wouldn't have happened if I just didn't go out. So it's like, might as well leave yourself open to opportunities and meeting new people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, just like saying yes to things where like you don't actually know what will happen. Like I met a pretty good friend through a random trivia event where I didn't know anyone, and yeah, we hang out pretty often.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I said yes to the trivia without like knowing what the situation would be like. But I think like over time, I've also gotten better at saying no to things where like I do know exactly how they will be, and I will probably like actually be kind of too tired for it. Yeah, and I think like on a more practical piece, like just researching neighborhoods well, like or like doing a lot of research before you figure out your living situation. Because I've known a lot of people who like moved to a neighborhood they really didn't like and that stuff, and were stuck there for a year, and then like decided they didn't like the city after that when they just had one bad experience with like their neighborhood or their roommate.
Yeah. I've heard of a friend who like first time in SF, he booked a hotel in Tenderloin, and I was like, how did you like?
To be fair, that's where a lot of the hotels are. Like a lot of the big name hotels are there. I guess if you're not familiar with the area, I guess you wouldn't know any better. But it's like for people who sign leases, it's like they'll go to like a cheaper place, which is also logically to do. But then it's like that like downtown to like Hayes Valley or like other like Mission Pipeline. Like the first year is always there.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of time, like when you're looking for a place to rent, like you sort by price, and then it's like, oh, this one's cheap, and the building looks nice.
Yeah, the building looks nice, and then right outside it's terrible.
A lot of people don't factor in like the safety of neighborhoods when they look for places. Yeah, but that's definitely a really important factor.
Yeah. Especially if you grew up in like a more chill place, like it's not something you're really thinking about. Versus like if you grew up in like an unsafe place, it's probably more top of mind when you're looking for a new place to live.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's like a lot of Canadians like grew up in like Vancouver or Toronto suburbs, so they don't actually realize like what Tenderloin is like until they come here.
Yeah, Vancouver. Growing up in Vancouver, I definitely feel like I was a little bit sheltered. Mm-hmm. We don't have a lot of crimes there. I mean, our crime rate is, I don't know, I don't have a concrete number. We've had shootings, but like they're not super common, and they don't happen that frequently. And
yeah, I think there is kind of a balance to be found in terms of like how much you're concerned about safety, because like on one end, like you might not think about it at all and actually put yourself in danger, but on the other end, I know people who like say they find SF so scary that they don't like going out much, but I think that's kind of like overblowing it, because a lot of the time, like it's not actually like no one's actually gonna physically hurt you. Like
that's why like because relatives like Texas. I mean, when I came here, or I mean the South Bay is like even more safe, but visiting SF, I never really felt like scared in SF, because I mean the fact that people are outside in certain areas, even in like the worst parts of the city, like people are still outside. Mm-hmm. Like in Texas, like some parts of Houston, like it's actually dangerous. Like there's nobody's gonna be outside. That's how you know, like it's actually dangerous. And like the worst case scenario for you is like death or getting shot. Like maybe like somebody like harassing you. That's like the average worst case scenario. It's pretty safe, like relative to like what it could be. Like maybe it's just like all what you're used to and what you're not used to. And that delta is what causes discomfort.
Yeah, I guess like when I think about neighborhoods now, it's like I want to live in a neighborhood that feels safe, but I don't avoid like going to restaurants or hangouts in like any neighborhood.
Yeah. I think I kind of agree with like what you said earlier about maybe like sometimes you're just like unfamiliar with that city or with that particular culture, how people like behave and how people kind of do things. So like that when you're unfamiliar, it can be like intimidating or feeling like making you feel unsafe. But it's not necessarily that it's gonna like endanger you. Exactly.
Yeah. So you're settled here in SF now. It's been like almost almost 5 years. It's going towards 5. You're living in SF. You have your job. Outside of those two worlds, like where do you feel like is your go-to spot? Like where do you feel like is home or feels homely to you?
Yeah, I've actually been talking to other people about the concept of a third place recently, and the concept is like your first place is your home, your second place is work, but you might also have a third place, which is like somewhere you go regularly as a social or like relaxing thing. And like classic example was like a church, because people are going there once a week. I don't actually go to church, but like another example is the coffee shop and Friends, because they're always meeting up there. And then like in How I Met Your Mother, it's like a bar. So I was like, I think like having one helps a lot with having a sense of community in a new city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True, that familiarity does breed a community. And given that, like, what do you feel like, or one or two of your third places?
So one that I would consider one is like the climbing gym and dog patch, just because me and some of my friends go there very regularly, like at least once a week, sometimes twice. And climbing is a sport where you have a lot of downtime, so you have like the option to talk to people if you
Yeah.
want it, but if you don't, you can just kind of go hard and do your climbing session and
Yeah.
leave.
Yeah.
And I think another one is my apartment building has a common area that me and some other people that live in the same building host a lot of events in. And I think like some, I mean, a lot of apartments have common areas and that stuff. So it's like always nice to have that option as a place to host things.
Actually, now that as you say that, I realize, like, yeah, I think I've been to the MB360 common area like a lot. Like, I think I know it better than my own common area, my own apartment.
I haven't seen yours yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you two? Do you have a place?
Yeah. Well, I guess the MB360 common area.
Oh, also kind of Infinity, although.
Yeah, I was gonna mention-
that's another apartment common area.
Yeah. There's a game night that happens every Tuesday near the Embarcadero in San Francisco. And I go most of the time I'm free on Tuesdays. I'll just go, and it's nice to just see the same people consistently, like play favorite board games, and it feels like a little bit of an escape from like your day-to-day life.
Yeah. What about you? Do you think?
Yeah, I think like for me, maybe like earlier this year, like every Thursday night we would have like paint night with the girls, and then we just like paint and then gossip a little bit and chat. But that kind of was taken away because I moved out from like the city that I was living in earlier this year, and I think right now I'm still kind of finding that third place, but I also feel like at the same time, like maybe it's also like the people that you like would encounter or surround yourself with in that third place also make it like more special for you. So like I feel like I don't really have this like necessary like physical third place right now, but I have like a group of people that I usually like would talk to on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, so that like, you know, so they're kind of like my third place or third people.
That is a good point, because like, I mean, during the pandemic, like we couldn't really meet in person, but there were a lot of like board game like groups or like just groups of friends meeting digitally that kind of fill that role.
Yeah, I think maybe it's more about like the close to weekly hangouts than like what you're actually doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more about the repetitive nature.
Yeah, like the community, right?
Yeah.